I gave him mal, I gave him banin, and he still does this. The reference is to Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira. The reference is to one of the famous opponents of the Prophet ﷺ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story. And the story therefore is a story that we can say the very first qissa of the Quran, that was meant to show the Quraysh the reality of this world. Allah says, إِنَّا بَلَوْنَاهُمْ كَمَا بَلَوْنَا أَصْحَابَ الْجَنَّةِ. We are testing these people, the people of Mecca. We are testing them just as we tested the people of the Jannah, the people of the garden. إِنَّا بَلَوْنَاهُمْ كَمَا بَلَوْنَا أَصْحَابَ الْجَنَّةِ إِذْ أَقْسَمُوا لَيَصْرِمُنَّهَا مُصْبِحِينَ. When they swore to one another that they would pluck the fruits before the morning comes. What is the reference here? You go to the books of tafsir. And Allah says this was a story that was well known. The scholars of tafsir say this was a story that was well known to the Quraysh. And it involves a famous land in Yemen, the land of Sana'a, the city of Sana'a. That outside of the city of Sana'a was a luscious garden. This was a story well known to the Arabs, and Allah is reminding them of that story. There was a luscious garden outside this city. And the owner of the garden was a pious Jew. This was before the coming of Islam, and the people of Yemen, there were many Jews living in Yemen. Up until the coming of Islam, there were many Jews in Yemen. And so this person was a righteous man, a believer in Allah. And he was a very rich person. And so he acquired this large property outside of Sana'a, which was a luscious garden. And he said that the fruits of a particular area of this garden are all for the poor. Whoever wants can just come and pluck, no questions asked. And he didn't put a wall around it, he didn't do anything, he let it open. And so it was well known that anybody who was hungry in Sana'a would go to that garden. When the man died, he had a number of sons. And the sons got together as soon as their father died, and they said, why was our father giving it to the poor? What did they deserve? What did they earn? Why should they get it? We are people who have wives and children. Why should our father's inheritance be given to the poor people? And so they came together and they made a promise right after their father died, because they're greedy for the money. And they make a promise that by morning time, we're going to put an end to those poor people coming and plucking the fruits and eating. It was just a small percentage of their land, but they were so stingy and greedy. They made a promise. And Allah says, إِذْ أَقْسَمُوا, they swore to one another. إِذْ أَقْسَمُوا لَيَصْرِمُنَّهَا مُصْبِحِينَ, that when the morning comes, لَيَصْرِمُنَّهَا means all the fruits will be plucked. They're going to pluck it and put it in their house. They're going to try to make sure the poor people don't get there. لَيَصْرِمُنَّهَا مُصْبِحِينَ وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ. And Allah says they didn't make istisna. Istisna has two meanings here. The Quran, as you know, is very deep and it has multiple meanings. One meaning, وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ, they didn't set aside a share for the poor people. They didn't set aside a share for the poor people, they wanted it all for themselves. وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ. The other meaning, وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ, they didn't mention Allah's name by saying, Insha'Allah, we're going to do. Because even though they said they're going to do it tomorrow, how can they say Insha'Allah when they're going to do something evil? And this is a profound point in the Quran, that when they wanted to do something evil, even though they were Muslim, and they were Jewish Muslims, they believed in Allah, they're supposed to say tomorrow, Insha'Allah, we'll do something. But how can you say tomorrow, Insha'Allah, we're going to steal? Tomorrow, Insha'Allah, we're going to stop the poor? You can't do that. So Allah is indicating, وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ, that they knew they're doing something evil, they couldn't even remember Allah. They felt so guilty, they couldn't even mention the name of Allah. وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ. And both of these meanings are valid. The first meaning, وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ, they didn't put aside a share for the poor, because istithna means to take aside a share as well. Another meaning of istithna is to say Insha'Allah. Both meanings are linguistically valid. So Allah is saying they couldn't even say the name of Allah because they knew they're doing something bad. وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ مِّن رَبِّكَ وَهُمْ نَائِمُونَ. So they went to sleep thinking that all of these fruits will come for them. And Allah said, while they were sleeping, oblivious, Allah's messenger, not a physical messenger, but perhaps a disease, perhaps a punishment. Something that Allah sent. طَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ. Something that Allah sent. Some scholars say it was a disease. Others say it was a fire that came, a thunderstorm that came and completely eliminated their trees. فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ مِنْ رَبِّكَ وَهُمْ نَائِمُونَ. So while they are oblivious, Allah Azza wa Jal is not. They sleep, Allah does not sleep. And Allah Azza wa Jal took care of their garden in a way that it eliminated it in its totality. فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ مِنْ رَبِّكَ وَهُمْ نَائِمُونَ فَأَصْبَحَتْ كَالصَّرِيمِ. When the morning broke, when the dawn broke, فَأَصْبَحَتْ كَالصَّرِيمِ. It was as if it was a ruined field. It was a burned crop. Sarim here means it's completely as if it's a burnt crop. فَأَصْبَحَتْ كَالصَّرِيمِ فَتَنَادَوْا مُصْبِحِينَ أَنِ اغْدُوا عَلَى حَرْثِكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَارِمِينَ. They wake up in the city, energized, enthusiastic to commit this evil, and they tell one another, come, let's go rush to the garden. أَنِ اغْدُوا عَلَى حَرْثِكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَارِمِينَ فَانْطَلَقُوا وَهُمْ يَتَخَافَتُونَ. And they rushed forward, whispering to one another, not even knowing that the state of their garden is not even there anymore. فَانْطَلَقُوا وَهُمْ يَتَخَافَتُونَ أَلَّا يَدْخُلَنَّهَا الْيَوْمَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِسْكِينٌ. They're boasting to one another, today no beggar is going to get any of our stuff. Today no poor person is going to get our money. So they're boasting and bragging, they're rushing to the garden. And look at the beauty of the Quran. In these 5 words we have such a perfect image. The garden is in ruins, they're energetic and enthusiastic. The garden is destroyed and they're boasting that not one poor person is going to get it. And they're absolutely right. Not one poor person is going to get it because there is no garden to be gotten. فَتَنَادَوْا مُصْبِحِينَ أَنِ اغْدُوا عَلَى حَرْثِكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَارِمِينَ فَانْطَلَقُوا وَهُمْ يَتَخَافَتُونَ أَلَّا يَدْخُلَنَّهَا الْيَوْمَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِسْكِينٌ وَغَدَوْا عَلَى حَرْدٍ قَادِرِينَ. There's a beautiful verse here. Scholars have over 10 different interpretations because the Arabic is simply so powerful. The Arabic is using such powerful words that even the average Arab doesn't know what this means. وَغَدَوْا عَلَى حَرْدٍ قَادِرِينَ. It's a very profound verse and we cannot give a detailed tafsir, but 2 interpretations suffice here. One interpretation that Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, hard here would mean full of anger and full of a type of you call it, you want to be skimp, you want to be miserly is the word I'm looking for, right? They're angry and miserly. And this is the only thing they're capable of. Hard here means an anger and a stinginess. And then Allah says, Qadireen means this is all that they could muster up. They couldn't muster up generosity. They weren't capable of being kind. They weren't capable of being good. All they were capable of was this type of hoarding of the wealth. That's all they were capable of. Another interpretation, and again both are linguistically valid and there's actually many more than these, is that Allah is saying ala hard means they had the money, qadireen, but they were still stingy. So the point here is they were stingy despite the fact that Allah had given them so much. And both interpretations are valid. فَغَدَوْا عَلَى حَرْدٍ قَادِرِينَ. And then فَلَمَّا رَأَوْهَا, when they finally get to the garden, قَالُوا إِنَّا لَضَالُّونَ. They say, we must have lost our way. This isn't our garden. And there's a beauty here that they call themselves ضَالُّونَ, thinking they're talking about physically losing the path. Allah is using their language against them. You are ضَالُّونَ because you went astray from the true path of what you were supposed to do. Not just the physical path. You actually have the garden correct, but you are ضَالُّونَ because you weren't following the Sirat al-Mustaqim. And so they testify against themselves in a manner that they didn't even realize. قَالُوا إِنَّا لَضَالُّونَ. Then they keep on looking and they realize, no, this is our garden. They couldn't recognize the garden. They could not recognize the garden, so they thought we've gone the incorrect direction. Then Allah says that they say, بَلْ نَحْنُ مَحْرُومُونَ. No, now we realize what has happened. بَلْ means now we realize what has happened. نَحْنُ مَحْرُومُونَ. We are the ones who have deprived ourselves of the garden. We are the ones who have deprived ourselves by our greediness. We had the best garden in the city. We had the most famous plot of land. And now we come in the morning and there's nothing to be seen. We were the ones who caused this. قَالَ أَوْسَطُهُمْ. And by the way, even in this, so many benefits. Again, we cannot give detailed tafsir, it's a khutbah, but so many benefits. Of the benefits, it shows these people had some good in them. And that's why they weren't destroyed. Unlike, for example, Qarun, he was guilty of the same, of being stingy. But along with stinginess, there was one more problem, and that was arrogance. And because he was stingy and arrogant, Allah didn't even allow him to live after that. Allah took care of Qarun and the wealth of Qarun. As for these people, we clearly see that they have an element of good in them. And so they are allowed to live, but the garden is taken away because they have some good. Another benefit we derive from this is a hadithi benefit. The Prophet explicitly says that it is possible that Allah deprives you of money or rizq that otherwise had been destined for you because of a sin that you commit. This is a hadith sahih, and this ayah proves it. This ayah proves it. They were multimillionaires for the time. They had the best garden in Sana'a. But because they desire to commit this pettiness, and the amazing thing, it's not even an immediate sin. It's rather being stingy and greedy, which is an indirect sin. It's a long-term sin. Because they were going to be stingy, Allah said, take the garden away. And this shows us that committing sins diminishes our blessings of this world as well. Of this world as well. And this is what we learn here. Yet another point of benefit, again this is a tangent, but it's important and interesting, that thinking of a sin doesn't make you a sinner. But beginning to act upon it will make you a sinner, even if you don't actually act upon it. I repeat, thinking of a sin does not make you a sinner. Thinking, just merely imagining, Allah Azza wa Jal will not call you to task. But suppose you wake up and you want to drink some alcohol, you want to drink some wine, you want to buy some beer. If you daydream about this sin, in and of itself, the daydream will not, it's not good, it's not healthy, but it's not sinful. Now, suppose you get in your car, you have your wallet, you're driving to the store. Now, and your intention is you're going to purchase that beer, that wine. Now, this isn't just a sin anymore. This is azima. This is azamta ala al-amr. This is something you are dedicated and determined to do. Now you have fallen into sin. Even if you get into a car accident and you don't get to the shop and you don't buy the wine, you still have committed a sin. Because you began the action upon it. So when these people were imagining to be stingy, nothing happened. But when they actually implement it, and they want to do it before they even are able to do it, Allah punishes them. And therefore, the punishment is legible, if you like, it is deserving. The punishment is legitimate when a person begins to act upon the evil niyyah. And that's what we benefit from this hadith. So, فَلَمَّا قَالُوا إِنَّا لَضَالُونَ بَلْ نَحْنُ مَحْرُومُونَ قَالَ أَوْسَطُهُمْ. The awsat literally means the middle one, but here it means the most intelligent one. The one that had the most wisdom. أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكُمْ لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you? Why didn't you praise Allah? Here tusabbihun doesn't just mean subhanallah. It means why didn't you be the better person and do something that would glorify Allah, i.e. be charitable. This is the meaning of tusabbihun here. Didn't I tell you this wasn't a good idea? Didn't I tell you that we should have been more righteous? قَالَ أَوْسَطُهُمْ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكُمْ لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. So again, this clearly shows there was some righteousness in these people. So they're trying to, and we can look at the same with the brothers of Yusuf, that one of them says, look, let's not kill Yusuf, okay? Let's try to do something else. There's some good in them, and that's why Allah saves them. Similarly, there's some good in these people. Why didn't you follow me? لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. But notice, he too is punished because, and this is another point, merely objecting to evil while your body walks along with it, that's not good enough. That doesn't get you the blessing. He objected verbally, he didn't like it in his heart, but in the end his greed overcame him. And he was with his brothers walking all the way. These are a group of brothers, remember. He's with his brothers walking to the garden because in the end the greed overtakes him, even though deep down inside it wasn't his idea. He wasn't happy about it, but hey, if everybody's doing it, let me do it as well. That's not going to save you. It's not going to save you. Allah gave you a will. Allah gave you determination. You didn't have to walk. You didn't have to go there. But he followed, and he was also, his part of the garden is also punished. قال أوسطهم ألم أقل لكم لولا تسبحون قالوا سبحان ربنا إنا كنا ظالمين. Immediately. And this is why these were good people, that Allah didn't punish them. This is why they were saved. Immediately they say Subhana Rabbina. Subhana Rabbina inna kunna zalimin. We were the ones who made this mistake. Last week's khutbah I talked about this attitude of acknowledging the sin coming from oneself. This is the essence of our salvation. We see it again. When they say we made the mistake, that is why they were saved. And in fact, they were blessed in the end, as we shall find out. قالوا سبحان ربنا إنا كنا ظالمين فأقبل بعضهم على بعض يتلاومون. They began blaming as well one another. Why didn't you stop us? They tell the one who was the most intelligent. Why didn't you do this? But in the end, everyone is guilty. And this is the point, that when everybody's guilty, it doesn't matter putting the blame on everybody else. You are just as guilty as your partners. فأقبل بعضهم على بعض يتلاومون قالوا يا ويلنا إنا كنا طاغين. They say, oh woe to us, we have transgressed the bounds. Notice, they call themselves ضالون, ظالمون, طاغون. Notice, they call themselves misguided. And they meant physically, but Allah uses it spiritually, misguided. They call themselves unjust, ظالم, and they were unjust. And they call themselves طاغي, which means to go beyond the bounds. And it is because of this that there is good in them. And the only thing that was damaged was their property and not themselves. Or not even worse than this, because wallahi, property damage, it is the least harmful damage. Damage to one's life, damage to one's health, damage to one's children, one's wife. SubhanAllah, this is 1,000,000 times more difficult to bear. So Allah Azza wa Jal simply sent this small punishment in order for them to wake up. And this also shows us the wisdom of every trial in this world. Every trial. Every trial for the believer, it is like a vaccination for the child. It hurts, but there is a wisdom that is for your own good if you understand. Every single trial in this world, it is like a vaccination that we give to our own children. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending down something for us to wake up before it's too late. This is your mercy if you only understood. And so they say, قالوا سبحان من كنا طاغين عسى ربنا أن يبدلنا خيرا منها إنا إلى ربنا راغبون. Perhaps Allah will give us something better than this garden. We are going to turn to Allah. We are going to establish a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Abbas said that they were given a garden better than this garden. Because every time Allah uses the word asa in the Quran, He will do it. Every time Allah says asa, perhaps, Allah Azza wa Jalla will do it. And so in this, they decide we made a mistake. And notice, how are they going to get their garden back? Not merely by business and money, but by recognizing it was taken away because of us. We need to turn to Allah. The real source of rizq is Ar-Razzaq. The real source of our wealth is the one who is Al-Ghani. And so they recognize we made a mistake. We need to turn back to Allah. Perhaps He'll give us a better garden. كَذَلِكَ الْعَذَابِ. Allah is saying this is what the punishment is. This is how it's going to come. And of course, remember the context of the surah. The context of the surah is what? The people of Mecca rejecting Islam. And Allah has blessed the people of Mecca an immense blessing. In the middle of the desert, they have carved out an existence. Water is coming from them to the miracle that which we still appreciate. We still have no idea where does this water come from. In the middle of the desert, millions of people are drinking from this fountain of Zamzam. And still we do not understand. Science can still not explain where this is coming from. And people are drinking and drinking and drinking, and the well is never ceasing and never stopping. Allah is saying this is a blessing. What should you do with this blessing? Thank me like the people of the garden before I punish you like I punished the people of the garden. كَذَلِكَ الْعَذَابُ وَلَعَذَابُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ. The punishment of the next world is much worse. This was a minor punishment. It was a trivial punishment. It wasn't the worst punishment. And it was a punishment that awoke them from their senses. And the punishment of the next is much bigger than this. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. If they only understood and really appreciated and thought about this story. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. If you think about it, every blessing from Allah is a bala. It is a test. Every blessing from Allah is a test. And what is due from us for those blessings is what the people of the garden should have done. And that is to acknowledge those blessings and be generous with them. And when we try to be stingy with those blessings, then not only will that work against us, perhaps the very blessing itself will be taken away. That is of the many lessons we learn from the very first story that Allah revealed in the Quran. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-azim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bima fihi min al-ayati wa dhikr al-hakim. Aqulu ma tasma'un wa astaghfirullah al-azim li wa lakum wa li sa'il muslimin kulli dhanbin fastaghfiruhu innahu huwal ghafurur rahim.